Well, good evening, everybody. Miram Burma. I'm Stephen Nash. I'm the chairman of the Anglo-Albanian Association, and I'm very happy to be introducing Rodney Oliver, who has kindly come to talk to us about postage stamps philately in Albania. I have first got a CV, which I'm going to read out. It's actually written in the first person, so I'm not talking about myself. This is Rodney talking, and I will start now. I was born in Southampton in 1937. My father was a stonemason. I attended Canford School on the banks of the Stour River in Dorset, and one of my favourite subjects was Latin. After leaving school, I decided to train as a solicitor, serving the public. I was articled a kind of apprenticeship, that is, to a legal firm in London for 5 years, where I qualified with honours. I then joined a legal practice in Reading and eventually became a partner. In 1984, I was appointed as a part-time judge on social security tribunals. I was appointed to be an immigration judge and eventually specialised in criminal and immigration law, working as a solicitor, representing and advising clients of many nationalities, but chiefly Albanians and Kosovans, and then refugees from Bosnia and Croatia too. In 2001, I decided to visit Kosovo with an interpreter so as to acquaint myself with conditions there. As a result, I became very interested in the culture and history of Kosovo, and I learned the Albanian language. In 2004, I made my first trip to Albania. I visited Tirana and Shkoda, where the family of my very good friend Naim Hassani lives. Everyone I met was very hospitable, and I liked the countryside very much. I visited Albania and Kosovo at least twice a year since then, and have walked through the Balkan Peace Park with a donkey carrying my luggage. I took the route from Thessi into Montenegro. I now have many friends in Albania and Kosovo. I have run marathons in New York, London, and Berlin, and several half marathons, including one in Pristina in 2003. Recently, I ran in a 10-kilometer event in Tirana. He doesn't say how long ago recently is, but
2019, actually.
Oh, I see. Well, that's pretty. Yes, that's a very good detail. Very impressive. I still run regularly, but not so far these days. I have been a philatelist since the age of 7, when my grandmother gave me a packet of stamps and an album. Whilst I was at school, I joined the Philatelic Society and specialised in collecting stamps from the UK and British colonies. On my visits to Kosovo and Albania, I began to obtain as many stamps as I could from the post offices there and expanded my collection year by year. From the UK stamp fairs in London, I've purchased a large collection of Albanian stamps and so continue to expand my collection. I'm now in the 3rd year of my chairmanship of the Reading Philatelic Society. I have visited other philatelic societies to show my Albanian and Kosovan collections, also explaining the history and culture of these countries. And it's given me great pleasure to become a member of the Association of Collectors of Albania. I have a little extract from a newspaper article, which I think I must read out because it shows the great respect with which Rodney is held by these fellow collectors. So I'm now quoting from an article in an Albanian newspaper. And it says, our member of the Albanian Collectors Association is special because he is an 82-year-old runner. I think we can now say that 84-year-old runner.
I think it's 84. That was about 2 years ago, yes.
Okay. Well, it's brilliant. It's very impressive. Mr. Oliver has been a prominent judge in his country and is now retired. he raced successfully and ran for 10 kilometers at the pace of a boy. Secondly, Rodney Oliver has been and is still a perfect ambassador for Albanian affairs in Britain. The stamps and postal facilities of Albania, which he collects, have greatly informed him with the information which he has been able to use in other circles. Right, now, before I hand over to Rodney, I just want to tell you quickly what we have in the pipeline. This may encourage those in the audience this evening who are not members of the AAA, the Anglo-Albanian Association, to join us. We have a constant flow of good events every month and only charge you £15 per annum for adult membership. I don't think you can find a better deal than that anywhere else in London. So firstly, I would mention in March, we have a talk by Kapka Kasabova, who is a young lady author who is making great impressions, and she has been inspired to write her book about Lake Ohrid and the Prespa Lakes. The book is called To the Lake, and it's being given in the form of a conversation with Teuta Skenderi, who is from Kosovo. In April, we have a joint seminar with the Royal Anthropological Institute, and the title of the seminar is The Papers and Art of Edith Durham, and it's a talk by Dr. Anne de Louis of the University of Orléans. On the 12th of May, we have a talk by Dr. Leah Upi on her latest book, Free, Coming of Age at the End of History, which you've almost all heard of because she's been getting a lot of publicity for her book, and we're looking forward to seeing her in May. In June, we have a talk by a representative of the PPNEA, which is the environmental preservation organization of Albania. And we've had talks by several of their representatives, but this one is specifically on bird life and conservation in Albania. So it's an illustrated talk, of course. In July, we hope to have another picnic at Parmore House. Parmore House is the house where King Zog and his family lived during World War II and afterwards for a while. And we hope to be accompanied, if we manage to arrange this visit, it's not quite certain yet, we will be in the company of the author historian Neil Rees. In September, we have our AGM, and we're hoping also to have the screening of an Albanian film, which will be curated by Fioralba Miraka. And in October, we are having a talk by Dr. Dimitra Jitsa, who is the Nash Fellow in Albanian Studies at SEAS, the School of Slavonic and East European Studies, and she's talking about the legacy of post-industrialism in Albania. And then a Flamurit event in November, and in December, a virtual tour with Caroline Perry of Tirana Art Galleries. She will actually be there, but she will be zoomed to us here. I should also tell you, just very quickly, that we're at the moment helping, and we are very busy with preparations for the centenary celebrations, which most of you might well have heard of already. That is the centenary of the opening of diplomatic relations between Albania and the UK. And we will be including some of our talks, and we're hoping to put together other events in Albania and the UK, including displays of the new G collection of antiquarian books on Skanderbeg, talks on the architectural heritage of certain Albanian cities, possible screenings of the much loved comedies of Norman Wisdom, alias Pitkin, and possible homage to the SOE soldiers who fought alongside Albanians in World War II. Not to forget, finally, and not exclusively, because we are still thinking about other topics and other things that we will do either here or in Albania, we will be listening, I hope, to polyphonic singers from Lavaria. And with that, I'm very happy to hand over to you, Rodney.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Stephen. As you've heard from my CV, I have a real passion for Albania. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I first met Kosovars when I was a duty solicitor in Reading, when they were dumped on the M4 as refugees. And within 3 months, I obtained their asylum, full asylum, and then my fame spread. And that's how I became interested in the Balkans. So as I said, I first went to Kosovo with one of our, I think the brother of one of our members, Mustafa Akil Lodger, and stayed with them. And then I headed straight for the post office and got the first issues of Kosovo in the year 2000. Then I arranged to go to Albania, and then I went to the Postage, the Philatelic Bureau in Tirana, and bought quite a few of the back stamps, so that I formed a collection. And then since then I've been adding to it. So what I want to do tonight is to take a very quick view of stamps. There are about 4,000 Albanian stamps issued since 2013, actually, so I can't possibly show all of them, but I'll show samples. But what I want to do first of all is to begin with the first stamps, which came in 2013, very primitive indeed. And then we'll go through up to the period of King Zog. And then when he left the country in 1938, we then go to the Italian issues, the German issues, and then we go to the communist issues in 1946, of which there are about 2,000 of them. And then when the Democrats came to power in 1991, there's another 1,000 stamps there. So what I'll do is to just show you my sources of information. I'm not an expert, I'm just experienced, that's all, and got a passion. So I went to the library in Skanderbo, Adrian, I think it is, the bibliothèque, and got this volume here of all the Skanderbo stamps up to 1917, and I'm showing them some of them, most for clarity than anything else. And then what I'll do is just go to the next slide. I then managed to purchase at a stamp dealer's in London a few years ago this very good book, actually, on Albanian stamps, which is a noted authority, actually, by Mr. Phipps. Apparently, some money was left by the Rossiter estate to do histories of certain countries, and Mr. Phipps has gone into enormous detail, even how many stamps were issued and how many were burnt when the issue was finished, for instance, and the history of Albania and all the various stamps issued by the rather strange governments after the Day of the Flag in 28th of November 1912. And then the next I got was another of these very, very good books of Mother Teresa. She's, of course, known as the heroine because she's a saint now. And, of course, twinned with Skanderbo, he's the other heroine, of course. And then I also then belong, and this is a meeting I had with one of the chairmen of the Collectors Association, Philatelic Organization in Tirana. They now meet actually at the Hotel International in Skanderbo, and I did visit them last in 2019, but unfortunately, due to COVID, I've been rather afraid to go back. Now, the first stamps actually were Turkish ones. The Turkish opened post offices in 1876. And I don't have any of those because they're rare and quite expensive. But what happened was, in the early 1900s, maybe end of Victorian period, a lot of the European states opened post offices at the ports. Austria, Italy have some stamps here, some from France, some from Greece. And as you probably know, the infrastructure in Albania then was extremely poor. You've only got to read Edward Lear during his travels in the early 1850s, crunching through swamps and everything else. It's extremely detailed, detailed in that. And there were no railways until I think Enver Hoxha built them in 1947. So the only effective way traveling quickly was by the Lloyd steamer, which operated from Trieste and Brindisi and so on like that. So the different countries issued their own stamps printed. In the case of Austria here, with the para, which was the Turkish currency, and piastres. So I've got some examples there. And then the Italians overprinted them. I've got, as you will see from the example here, Albania. That seems to be the European description of actually of the country itself, not Chypria. And then there were various other issues here with the different towns actually issued. One was Durazzo for Durrës, one for Vlora, the other for Skoda. So those circulated until about 1915, and it was absolutely essential, obviously, for these great powers, if we may use them, to use them not only for commercial purposes, but prestige. There were one or two post offices inland, for instance. So those went on to about 2015. Now, the very first stamp, well, not exactly, I'll go do something in the moment. It was issued on the 5th of May, 2013. Ismail Chimali, who raised the flag on the 28th of November, appointed a cabinet, and the postmaster was Lev Nossi, NOSI, who unfortunately was executed by Enver Hoxha during the communist period because he was an intellectual. But he organized the post office, and the first stamp ever, and I don't have a copy of it. I have a copy of it, but I don't have any originals because they're very, very expensive. And only about, I think, 2,000 were actually issued. But what they were engraved rubber stamps, and what they did, they stamped them actually on the envelope, and they were 1 piastre each. So that went on for a little while, and then the next issue here, I'll just do the screen. Yeah, this was the actual 100th anniversary actually in 2013. That's how I got it. And the Albanian Post Office do issue a kind of description word book. On the left-hand side is an Albanian, and on the right-hand side is English. So it's a very useful, and they give the statistics here of how many stamps were issued at that time for the anniversary. So we'll go to the next slide. What happened was the stamp wore out, and then they found a large number of Ottoman stamps still in the post offices. There are about 17 post offices. In fact, the first Albanian stamps only didn't go through the whole of Albania as we know now. They went probably up to Tirana, Korça, Vlora, Durrës. It was only a short area. But I've got some examples here of some of the old Turkish stamps from about 1890 onwards, quite primitive, and they never had any pictures of anyone. They'd have the Sultan's signature, which just looks like a ball of wool to me. But what they did they then got a hand stamp and stamped, as you will see, the double-headed eagle of all the Ottoman stamps there of various values. They didn't act, they were using Ottoman currency at that time anyway, and they used the word shpeniye. As you will see when you look at a lot of the stamps, they spell Albania in various ways, like shipenier and so on like that. But I thought they had the we were going to do standardized language, I think, at one of I think it was the Congress of Monastir in 1908. But there we are, that's the way things went. So these only were issued for a short time. And then, yes, I was just going back in time on this one. This is a very strange issue. They were never actually issued, but they were called the Modiano stamps of 2012. They were printed in Trieste.
1912, is it?
Yeah, 1912 they were, printed in Trieste. And apparently when they arrived in Vlora, that was before the first stamp, they only had a one-headed eagle, so they were instantly rejected. But some do survive, and I was managed to get a few on eBay here. Unfortunately, this here I put upside down, but if you can just look at this, well, yes, you can, this one here, I think at the bottom, it's sort of, well, the currency is actually in Chindara, that cents, and francs. They were trying to adopt the European currency. And that's how the, yes, there we are. That's the rather strange upside down. It's some languages in French, some in Greek, but this of course has the eagle with just one head, which just wouldn't do. I don't know how it happened. Anyway, they were rejected anyway. So the next issue was even more primitive. This was round about July 1913. Again, these were hand stamped, and you can probably see how they were manufactured. They had the circle there with the provisional government of Albania, which the translation there was. And then they stamped a double-headed eagle rather haphazardly. And then what they did, they actually typed the value. As you will see, one here was 10 para, there's 40 para to a piastra, I understand, 20 para, and then you go up to, I think, piasters at one is at the bottom, actually. But those were actually on a sheet now. They weren't actually printed on an envelope, so you had to use scissors to cut them. But I'm actually told that someone tried to use one of these stitching machines, but they didn't really work for perforation. Those lasted probably about 6 months. And then the next, let's just get this in hand now. The next stamps were actually issued on the anniversary of the raising of the flag. I've got some better examples, but this is an envelope actually with them on. And these were a little bit more sophisticated, but they were still printed in stages. They had the frame first of all, as you will see there. Then they printed the double-headed eagle, and then they printed the price on it, all by hand, apparently. This is a registered envelope, actually, but I will show some better stamps in a moment. So let's pass to the next one. This issue here came from the publication I showed you, but it gives a better image. This is actually issued by international standard now, a very good standard. And they were, it was from Portrait, which I believe a gentleman in Czechoslovakia drew and intooled. And you will see that they've got Shpenia Elia, free Albania. And then apparently they've spelt Skanderbo wrong. Actually, they've put E-R-G-U. I don't know how that happens, but there we are. King of the Albanians, Mabreti Shqiptari Vedetit, and then Gjeje Skanderbo. But what happened was they put the currency in European currency following the French. So they had Chindaka and then the francs. So you've got 2 Chindaka, 5, 10, 25, 50, and one franc. Those were quite successful, actually, because quite a few were printed. And may I just warn you that we're now going to enter into a lot of overprinting. A lot of stamps are overprinted for some reason or other. And also, when we go through the issues to the end of when Germany was defeated, it's really a history lesson of Albanian stamps. So it's extremely interesting and challenging too. So let's look. Yes, these are the independence ones, actually, now a little bit enlarged. There's one I couldn't get there, which is rather rare. But what I did at the Stampex exhibition at Islington, I bought, as I said in my preview, some albums, and this is a pre-printed one of Italian stamps. These are the actual used stamps of Scandabo here. There's one here, Duracy, there's various other stamps which were actually used in the posted international postage too. Now, the ones at the bottom here, you will probably remember that Prince Wied, a German prince, was chosen. I think he was they actually advertised for king too. And his aunt, I think, or niece, chose him and recommended him. And he arrived in Albania on the 7th of March, 1914. And they overprinted these stamps. I've got a better copy later on, but the 7th of March, 1914. And then they had just before the 7th of March, they put 1467. I don't know why, what that year was, but Scandabo died of malaria in 1468. So I'm just going through the history of the stamps now. Let's go to the next slide. What happened was that a little while later, the Albanians who were buying these stamps couldn't pay or didn't like the Chindaka and the franc. So the postal authorities had to overprint them in Ottoman currency. So you've got 5 grosz there, 2 there, and then you've got, I think, on the 1 franc, that's 5 para, I think it is. A grosz is a piastre, that's right. The grosz is piastre. So those were those stamps there. They were issued for quite some time until the issues of the Scandabo issue ran out. Let's see. Now, yes, I've got a picture here of the arrival of King Wied now, which I got from one of the articles here with the princess. He's got a rather Ruritarian uniform, as you will see. He's the one on the left, I think, and Esad Pasha, I think it is, who was leading the Muslim Albanians, is on the right in the photograph. And that's him in full regalia as on a 2004 anniversary stamp issued later. I will go to his stamps a little later on, actually. These are a little bit more enlargements here of the 7th of March. You would say, Roft Mabadreti, hail to the king, actually, the 7th of March. And these were overprinted by hand, funnily enough. They're all lackadaisical, all of the printing, but at least they had a very respectable portrait of Scandabo, actually, too. He, of course, only lasted 6 months because he had to return to Germany at the outbreak of the First World War. And I was reading today that even his batman and cook had to go before he did, so he was rather left dry. But he was there was a special palace actually in Durrës, which was then the capital of Albania, which he resided on and had his cabinet. So this example here of a used cover, it's got T on it, which means taxa. That that means it's kind of postage due if you didn't stamp it. And this seems to be one sent to Brindisi, and it was taxed actually, and it's actually got a postmark here, Brindisi, but it was actually posted, or in, I think in Vellora, yes. I had an example the other day when they had an airline, and I will show you the airline stamp soon, that that the letter was posted in Durrës, it arrived in Brindisi the next day. So that shows you the speed of the system. But I'm afraid here everything was by sea, but Durrës was the main port. Now, there's some other stamps here. I'll just go back, sorry about that, which has got an overprint. And you probably remember the very famous photograph by photographer Marubi, who has a museum actually in Skoda, on which I've been round. He took a photograph of an anniversary of the national flag raising in 1915. And these stamps were overprinted with what I've got here. It reads in English actually, 19th of March 1914, commemoration of the national flag raising, Skoda Fortress on Kalaya Rosafat Castle. So you've got really an overprint of the currency, and then you've got an overprint in red of the commemoration. So that's a double overprint. Now, what happened was, as I said, the provisional government in Vellora only covered really the middle Albania, but there was, of course, a lot of the international brigades were occupying other parts of Albania, and they set up some of their own postal systems. There's quite a few of them, and I just want to show you some examples because that's all I've got. But there was one in Korça, actually, the French military occupied Korça in October 1916, and these stamps were then issued with a rather different double-headed eagle, but that was the national emblem which they adopted. And they had in the side, if I translate to English, self-government of Korça, and there was another issue, issued Albanian Republic. And I think those lasted till about 1920. Now, there was some stamps here issued of Himari of North Epirus in the south. It was a principal place of Greek-speaking villages near the coast of Saranda. The Greeks withdrew, and I'm just reading my notes here, in February 2009, 1914. And a self-autonomy was proclaimed in July 14, and they issued these stamps. They're rather macabre too. As you'll see, there's a skull and crossbones, I think, with a double-headed eagle. And the stamps were produced by hand stamp in lepta, which was the currency then. They had the double-headed Byzantine eagle, and below the emblem of the authority, which is a little oval stamp. And the inscriptions read from the Greek, liberty and death stroke defend the fatherland. So that's another curious issue, which excites philatelists. Now, there's another issue here with Miradita, and that's where Miradita, where I think King Zog, which we shall explore in a moment, came from. He in the district of Mat, and they organised an independent republic actually, and they issued these stamps here. Rather primitive again, they're not perforated in any way. Various currencies, I think in Para and, no, Chintar, yes, right, that's the cents and the francs, they adopted those. And stamps of taxers, there's postage due, or paying actually taxes to the authority at that time. So that's another example of the stamps actually issued. Now, as I said, the Scandinavo stamps ran out, And what happened was that they borrowed or took the Austrian stamps for the revenue, and they overprinted them in a very extraordinary way. As you will see, they got Postage, and then apparently there seems to be a kind of Halley's Comet. The last Halley's Comet was 1909, I understand, because I do dabble in astronomy. And then they've got Skodaras, and then the rather strange spelling of Albanian, Shqypnis. Those went on, I think, for about 1920. And it seems to be that Skoda was the main postal area in the north. And of course, it was constantly being invaded and occupied by many troops of other nationalities. So I have got gaps here because I couldn't get them all. But double-headed eagle, which apparently is the emblem of Austria too, for some reason or other. In fact, a lot of the European countries, including Poland, do have an eagle as an emblem too. So that was quite fitting to the Albanian stamps. Now, Prince V is on some stamps, but unfortunately, he left the country in September 2014, and the stamps which were commissioned arrived a few weeks after he, so they were never issued. They were designed, I think, in Austria, printed in Vienna, and this is his portrait, rather Ruritanian. But they were never officially put through the post office at all, actually. I'll go back to the stamps at the bottom in the moment. This is a photograph from a postcard of Rosafat in Skoda. And I've got here some information that the Congress of Kushner decided that Skoda should be governed by an international mission. And as stocks of previous issues had been exhausted, a new design printed in Para was prepared for issue with a small portrait of Skanderbo. And they were printed, I think, in Germany. But when the International Commission had dissolved, the soldiers and the occupiers of Skoda had left, and they were left with these stamps. I'm sorry, I'm just going back a bit now. These are the Prince V stamps, which were overprinted with the various colours and denominations. And those were used for a temporary period. And then I've got yes, I'm just skipping a little bit now because the stamps in my album, yes, the stamps which were issued by the occupying forces in Skoda, well, these stamps with the little portraits of Skanderbo. I've got when I finish this lecture, I will show you the actual stamps in the bigger theme. But they were that Skoda was cancelled, and they had a post horn, and then they later overprinted with Besser, which Besser means, as you probably know, a peace. And that's what it meant, that all hostilities were finished, and a more permanent government little later on was drawn up in Albania to govern the whole of the territory as it then was. So with a kind of national government actually installed, they then issued what we call a definitive issue, which was these stamps here, definitive issue with views of cities. And I've got if we just look at them a little deeper, I can tell you what's on them. On the two, they're actually in Chindaka, and a golden franc actually was the highest denomination of currency, but they got 2 cents was Jurocastra, 5 is Canina near Valora. The next one, I think I'm actually hidden by this one here. This one was Berat, the 10. My favorite one is the 25 chintz here, which is the Vizier's Bridge, which crossed the River Drin before it was flooded for by the Enver Hoxha regime for hydroelectric. Unfortunately, it was blown up by the Serbs in 1914, and in any case, if the flood was there, it wouldn't have existed anyway. But it is a typical Ottoman bridge, which there are many examples, which I'm sure those who've been to Albania and have crossed over. No bars, you went straight over, and no shields or edges at all. And then to 51 is got Rosa Fat, that's in Skodra, and I think there's Korcha. Here, this is Korcha here, and then the last one is Durrës. That's one to do franga. Yes, 2 francs. That's the plural of franc apparently in Albanian. Yes, these were the stamps here, which was rather out of sync in the album I purchased. But these are the stamps here with a very small portrait of Skanderbo and overprinted Bessa to cancel Skoda out. Now, because I told you there's a lot of overprinting now. We're going to go into a regime of a lot of overprinting, actually. And this is where Zagoli, Ahmed Zagoli, that was the later King Zog, comes into being because he, as I understand it, was appointed Minister of the Interior at some stage. And we've got here a commemoration of the National Assembly in 1924. And I looked up Kaluan, and apparently that's old Albanian, I'm told, for January. So it's got National Assembly, the Bletje Kuchizris, Jurana, Kaluana, 1924. And these were overprinted. Now there's some more overprinting to come. Yes, this is King Zog. I thought I'd put that here. And I happen to be in Burrell, seeing a client to take a statement from him, and that's me there. But he stands in the marketplace, very much to attention too. Then what we've got here is I've done a calendar of the King Zog stamps. In 1925, he became first head of state. I think he was elected as president, I think. And then in 1927, the second anniversary, and there was a wreath put round his head actually on the stamps with the letters AZ, Ahmed Zogu. And then in 1925, the 1st of September, he had a coronation. There were no crown jewels, I understand, unlike Napoleon, who crowned himself. He was simply promoted by the Parliament. Those stamps were printed in Rome, and we shall see in 1930 a definitive issue, which I'll explain a little later on. And then in 1930, there was a second issue of his 35th birthday, and 1931, inauguration of Tirana. So we'll just go to the next stamps to see what we can find. Now, what happened was, I think there was, yes, the King Zog was rather thrown out of the country in, was it 1924, I think, by Fan Nolly. He then escaped the country, and King Zog came back with an army of about 3,000, and then took power at that time. And you've got here the stamps. It's got Triumph of Parliament, 24th of December 1924, and those were issued, I think, the following year. So you've got a complete set of the original definitive stamp overprinted. The previous stamps at the top here with a cross were Red Cross charity stamps with a premium, I think, of 5 Chindaka there. The ones at the top had a rather small Red Cross, signifying the Red Cross, but to make them more noticeable, they enlarged the cross. And then apparently Albania was declared a republic, so you got another overprint of Republika Shqiptari there. And then you've got another one here. Yes, that's I think another one that's just authorised in the Parliament. Now, the first portrait of King Zog, which is not very flattering, comes on these stamps, and this is when he was proclaimed president. And the stamps, as you will see, go from, I think, one Chindaka to 5 franc, and of course, I think the currency then was golden francs. I think they must have been. I saw one once actually when we had a conference at Freeth, actually, which we hoping to attend in the summer. Somebody showed me one, and it really was a golden one, just as a specimen. There was then another issue here where you've got the AZ on Ahmed Zorgu with a floral wreath. Let's see what the next one is here. I'm just trying. Yes, another unflattering portrait when he's crowned king. Actually, there's 2 here. Yes, not flattering at all, actually. But then you've got MBR Shqiptari. That's the overprint for those. So that's when he was crowned king. Now, another very fine, handsome issue was another definitive issue, was issued in 1930. And here's his portrait here. And there were various views of Albania here. You've got Lake Butrint, which is here, on these views here, the Ni Chinchari, Du Chinchari. And then you've got him with 4 portraits. And then this one here has got the King Zogu Bridge, which is over the River Mut, not far from Leja. I've actually walked across it. It's quite safe, and it's still there on the main autostrada on the way to Prizren, if you're fortunate to find a parking space. And then the more expensive ones are the Zog Fortress and Bugarit, not far from Burel. Here, ruins of the looks like the castle of Zog in Mat, which I understand you can still see. It's a description in the tourist guides. Then there was the 10th anniversary of his succession. He had a number of stamps here with some of the Skanderbo emblems, principally his helmet, for instance, the deer's antlers there, which I think was a present to him from I forget who it is, but it was, I think, by the Doge of Venice, I think, actually. So we've got an issue there. Now I've got a photograph in the moment from the Times obituary of Queen Geraldine, but they actually married in, I think it was April 1937. And this was the wedding issue, the royal wedding issue, Queen Geraldine and the King Zog, which is quite a nice likeness actually too. Again, with an emblem of Skanderberg's helmet there, to showing the connection. Apparently, Prince Bede never abdicated, but I think when King Zog was appointed, there was an automatic abdication anyway. This was the photograph, the famous photograph of their wedding with the 6 or 7 bridesmaids, which were the sisters of King Zog actually, in Tirana. And I understand the Italians whom he was befriending in a rather strange way, was trying to get him to marry an Italian countess. But as I understand it, reading the obituary, King Zog had a New Year's party, and he chose for a photograph the Hungarian princess from Budapest. She came along, danced with him, and the next morning he delivered to her 100 roses on her breakfast tray with a proposal to marry, and she accepted immediately. And so what he said in the afternoon, well, that's enough for one day. And I understand the marriage was very happy indeed. So we just go a little bit further on. This, I think, is the 35th anniversary of the nationals of Albania here. Again, there's Queen Geraldine, a little bit of whiff of Skanderbo here in the middle stamps there. And a special little combined stamp here which you can buy more as a specimen than anything else. Now, what I want to do is to go to the air issue now. There was a special air issue, and the airline, which I think was a German one, I think Aria Lloyd Airlines, something like that, I think was the company that operated them. But these stamps, I think, were from 1926. And these here are overprinted Republic Shqiptari there too. So these came along, and I'll just go to the next slide if I can. I was fortunate enough to acquire this one, which is the advertisement for this talk actually. And this shows that it was, I think, to commemorate an anniversary of their association with the Red Cross. And you can see the Red Cross stamps at the top, and the cancelled full set of the air stamps there. And it is the first flight from Tirana to Skoda on the 1st of April 1925. I don't know whether they got the date wrong. I thought it was 1926 they issued these. And I asked my great friend, my lawyer friend, Naim Hassani, because his family live just outside Skoda, was there an airfield in Skoda? And apparently there was a military one, actually, which he, as a child, went to have to see the aircraft landing and taking off and so on. But it's no longer there now. It's been overtaken by a modern village. Well, that's quite an interesting cover, as we call them as a philatelist. Some more air stamps here. Britannia Shqiptari, they were overprinted, and there were some special air stamps issued too with King Zog, Posta Iori, and the various inflated, I think, values, because air travel was quite expensive. So those. Now, what happened was, of course, King Zog had to leave the country on the 3rd of April 1939, because the Italians, who had taken a great hold financially and architecturally, wanted to expand their kingdom. And I'm told that in about 1936, King Zog was threatened with a fleet of Italian cruisers in Durrës Harbour, and he had to capitulate and allow more investment and so on in Albania by the Italians. And they launched another attack at the beginning of April 1939. I'm afraid his forces were too weak to resist them. And with the aircraft of Italians flying overhead, he left the country. His wife, who had just a few days before given birth to the Crown Prince Leka, she had to flee the country in a car towards Greece, and he left a few days later with the country's gold bullion, I understand, to Greece, and I think nearly lost it on being transferred to a boat to get to France, I understand. And then, as we know the story, he spent the war years in Freeth, just above Marlow, not far from where I live in Reading. And he tried to court Winston Churchill to help restore his monarchy, but I'm afraid Churchill was not interested. So the Italians overprinted the 1930 issue with their Constitutional Assembly, 12th of April 1939. So they were in occupation until they capitulated to the Germans a little later on. The Italians actually did a definitive issue, a standard issue here, rather interesting, with King Emmanuel III with his portrait, some, I think, national costumes here. His national costumes, an air stamp, some castles here. I think I haven't identified them. I think this one was Brutrint, actually, one of the Roman remains in Brutrint. I don't know what that was. And then there was another issue here. This was from a German stamp album, actually. Flug Martin, there's been air stamps. And there was some more called Britannia Shibtari. I think there's some national costume there, an aircraft, a national costume, King Emmanuel in his uniform, and so on. And apparently, yes. So those issues were issued. These are mint ones, actually. And then the Germans took occupation in 1943, and they overprinted the issue of the Italians here. I think 14th of September 1943, yes, when they took occupation. So that was that. The Germans then were defeated, and I think another provisional independent state of Albania was formed from October 44 to January 1946. But they had some initials on here that I couldn't really overprint, but they used there were some stocks of the 1930 issue stored away, and they brought them out, but they omitted to use the portrait of King Zog for some reason or other. Maybe it was very anti-monastic, of course, at that time. So they overprinted it with various values. There we are. I think that's Brutrint, actually, too. It's got UNCL, looks like Shibtari, I think it is there. Franc, Albanian francs. Yes, so they were still using Shindata and francs at that time. I'm told, I did a little research actually about the currency, and apparently the coins were in Leka actually, but they still use them as Shindaka. But I'll a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Another issue here was the anti-tuberculosis issue, actually, which was 1943. as a full set here, and the bottom set was a charity set for the war dead. Actually, that was 1945, after the war had finished. So we now go to another era of the Enver Hoxha years now. The stamps up here, I'm told, are the Popular Republic, yes, of Albania, and those were overprinted of an earlier issue actually too. But I really can't show you many of the stamps of the communist era, because the Stanley Gibbons catalogue, which is a standard authority, shows just over 2,000 of them. I can just show you a few examples. Now, I'm told that on the 1st of September 1947, the official currency was changed from francs to leka, L-E-K-A. Which I don't think made a lot of difference to the currency. Now, I've got an issue here, which I think is interesting. This is the commemoration of the start or construction of the first railway in Albania, Tirana to Durrës and then to Elbasan. And you can see a sort of steam train in the air and some workmen pickaxing away. I don't know whether it was done by hand or by mechanical means. I think a mixture of both, but there is a set of those actually. Now, as you know, Albania, Enver Hoxha became very familiar with the Russian regime, and so a lot of the stamps which were issued got Russian influence, and the most prominent ones were to commemorate the first man in space. This one here has got the first living being in space, a dog called Laika. And then we got some Yuri Gagarin here, and another one, I don't know how far advanced they got, but this one seems to be flying in space, probably tethered by a cord of some sort. And there was another issue here, I think that's 25 Lek, with some spacemen usually uniformed. And it's there's a few others here. It's just an example anyway of those stamps. Now we come to several issues over the period from 1946 to the death of Enver Hoxha, showing him here in military uniform, civilian uniform. He seems to be leading a procession here. A very friendly one there, with some of his courtiers and party officials. He seems to be here as a young man here. And they did issue another one on his 80th birthday. He was born in, he died in 1985, I think. But this was issued, I think, on his 80th birthday. He was born in 1908. So this was issued on his 60th birthday. Yes, that's right, this one here. They did issue one subsequent to his death, commemorating his birth. Now, they were obviously like to commemorate a lot of the Stalinist characters there. This person I expect you know extremely well. They've got pictures of him also giving speeches and that sort of thing with his hands in the air and so on. That's Lenin, there's Stalin, and this one seems to be Lenin and Marx, I think it is. So there were quite a few examples in obeisance to the as a fellow communist regime in Russia. There are some stamps issued during the communist regime because they respected Skanderbeg. This was an issue here from the book that I showed you. in 1951 with a full bearded and with a helmet on. This was another issue here in 1967, and on the left, and another issue in 1968 being the 500th anniversary of his death at Kruja. So there's various images here of Skanderbo with his helmet, portrait, and so on. And there's another page here. These are other issues here, 1968 too, which they really made a song and dance of it too, actually, too, with these various pictures. This is my favourite picture here, in red, for instance. Now, the range of stamps issued by the communists was extremely thematic. I could do a talk on even one theme, such as flowers and flora and that sort of thing. Sea animals, fish, deer, all sorts of things, and bears. But I'm just showing an example of them. Apparently, what happened was I don't think the normal populace did use the stamps postage very often. And so what the communist regime, postal authorities did was to print excessive quantities of stamps and many, many issues, and they issued them to their sort of friendly embassies abroad, which were used really for publicity. They gave them, apparently the embassies gave the stamps away free to philatelists, because philately was getting quite an industry now, and it was another way of showing the prestige of the communist regime, and also advertising it too. And a lot of them have percolated through to stamp collectors like me, which we can pick up very cheaply actually in auctions and on eBay too. So there's examples of them here. There's ships, transport, domestic animals here, dancing. There's quite a few of the balletists too, and trains and other transport here. There's a whole range of them too. They were very keen on stamps with sport too, especially the Olympic Games, the European Games, boxing, football, any sport that really, it was an advertisement really to get the populace fit, for instance. And then there's I think they commemorated musicians like Beethoven here. There was also various hobbies here. There was showing the scenery. I'm trying to get this here. And also archaeology was very keen. They had a set of Roman emperors and that's things like that. And also quite a lot of political themes too. Anniversaries of various congresses like the Congress of Permit and Lushnia and so on. And also they were very keen on paintings in the gallery. They had quite and we should be having a lecture, I think, as Stephen said, quite soon. So we probably see some more, but I won't have time or room to show you all the portraits, but there was quite an array of them. Now, of course, Enver Hoxha and the communists fell out with the Russians, and they were replaced actually by the Chinese. And this is a Chinese issue here with Mao Zedong and Mao here. And also there's a spacecraft here too, in obedience to the Russian launch into space. And I also understand from literature that China actually issued some stamps portraying the merits of the communist regime in Albania. So there was a bit of a tit for tat, but I don't think there was any race to do the best issues at all. This is they commemorate Ismail Kamali, who raised the flag in Vellora, 1912. And they also issued one of Lord Byron too. They seem to be very, very worshipping of him too. And here's a very political one here, the history of the People's Republic of Albania, for instance, you see. There's a few others here, giving, I'm not very skilled at this actually, trying to get them done. Yeah, here we are. I think 5th of May seemed to be an anniversary, the date of the national founding, I think, Dita I Deshmorivev to Combit. There was a set there. There's another set here of another commemoration here, and so on. We've got quite a few of them. I just picked a lot of these at random, actually, just to show you. There's another decision here. I can't quite see it actually, but you've got the communist five-starred emblem here too, actually, which was imprinted on the stamp. So the communist regime finished in about 1991, and we now come to the post-1991 regime, and a lot of the stamps there were more not nationalistic or political at all. There was a lot of events of culture, aligning with Europe, NATO, and so on like that. But what I want to do is to just go through some Mother Teresa. Now, this photograph I took when I first went to Kosovo. It's outside the very famous bookshop there called Ducagini, which I bought the canon actually for my studies and used as a judge when I had to judge cases. But there were many, many portraits of Mother Teresa, as you will see. The first one I like and is very dear to me was a portrait of Mother Teresa with a child here, which was in 1991. And then she's here with her famous headscarf, which is here. The Pope's visit came, I think, in 1992, I think. She died in 1997. And I put this one is because there's an emblem of Skanderborg on his horse. And we mustn't forget Princess Diana. She is on a stamp here with her, because she was the Queen of Mine, the Princess of Mine, so I may put it that way here, with Mother Teresa here. And there's a Europa one of 1996, 150 lek. And then she was then canonized and then made a saint. And this is the latest stamp showing her shroud when she was buried, just before she was buried, and it's named Saint Mother Teresa. And I got first day covers of that too. So that's Mother Teresa. There were various European flavors too, actually. There's Walt Disney here, if I can just bring those up. No, I can't actually. Yes, I can. Yes, Walt Disney, Bambi, and so on like that. Shapira, Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, Elvis Presley. Yes, Harry Potter, and President Bush visited Albania on his way to Kosovo, I think in 2007, and only spent 6 hours there, principally visiting Kruja. And then he flew away, but they've done a rather handsome stamp here, 10th of June 2007, 20 Lecker, I think it is. Then for some unknown reason, they had some British primitive steam locomotives at the 190th anniversary. I don't know why they chose the 195th anniversary. Why not 200? Maybe they were short of issues for that particular year. So the one mostly sees in postcards from Albania is the one with the rocket, 90 leka, which seems to be the standard postal rates at the moment. Then there's locomotion. I think Puffing Billy, I think it is known. But they're very nice stamps with the various inventors like George Stephenson and so on. And then the Shakespeare. I've got one here of a sort of, yes, this is a very nice one here, of Ladybird. And there was several issues, a whole set of those stamps actually, from sort of 5 lek to about some 200 lek. And then there's one here without the Albanian flag, Flamuri Comitor, national flag, 40 lek. Then there was quite a series of national costumes, which will be more later actually too. And not forgetting Ishmael Kadari, which I thought I'd liked because I've read a lot of his books and I'm sure a lot of you have too. And last but not least is Norman Wisdom Pitkini here, which we sing some films later on, but he was known as the downtrodden workman, and Enver Hoxha would not allow any other European films or features to be screened, and he seemed to fit the national character. So he is still renowned, and in fact had visited Albania shortly before his death, actually too, in the National Stadium in Tirana, which he was worshipped. Let's see what we got next. I'm trying to get the next one out. I think I've got a bit stuck here. Yeah. I've gone back. So I've gone forward. Here we are. Yes, Mickey Mouse, very much acclaimed here. There was a block of stamps there. And then there's some stamps here worshipping Albanian food, apparently. I just picked a lot of these purely at random, just to show you. And then I've got another issue here. Yes, national emblems. I shall show a few more, but they did a kind of a book where you could actually buy in a post office and peel the stamps out, but it was purely, for example, to show various shields of various clans. And I understand I've actually bought a book of the historic dictionary of Albanian clans and families by Michael Gunn. I've actually got it on my desk now, which I've been reading. So that was very useful. The Albanian postal authorities, Postage Shari, commemorated the 550th anniversary, 2018, of Skanderbo's death here. Maybe some of the photographs are familiar of you, the emblems, but there he is. Not in red there, but a very familiar portrait. And then there was another issue, which I think that this block here, I think it's purely for exhibition purposes, but you bought it and it raised money for the postal authorities, 150 lek and 250 lek. But this was the stamp that was actually issued on the envelopes. Yes, I think it was 250 lek, which would be rather more expensive. I've got some examples here of some games. I think this was, yes, the Olympic Games, 1996, at Atlanta in America. the Albanians seem to like to celebrate a lot of the foreign games because they did send athletes and football teams and that sort of thing. Yes, here's a block of Albanian costumes. They did quite a few series of these too, and I think it actually gives you the if you need a magnifying glass, really, I do anyway, when I see the stamps. And also they have the date, which is very useful for when you get a stamp which is used to write it off in the catalogue. These were issued in, I see, 2000, yes. And I remember I probably bought some of these when I visited Albania at the post office in 2004. Yes, these are some of the emblems here too. I'm afraid I haven't heard any of these tribes, and I'll have to look at Michael Gunn's catalogue to familiarise ourselves with them. Yeah, here we are here. There's quite a few of them too. So those are another examples of giving culture. Now, this was the emblem of the 100th anniversary of the founding of raising the flag here, which was issued, I think, in 2012. I've got a stamp here of Mother Albania, which is I think a stone statue in the Martyrs Cemetery, where Enver Hoxha was buried, of course, but he was exhumed and taken to the ordinary cemetery. But I have actually seen that there, and it is quite a majestic statue. Now, this seems to be the last overprint of any of the Albanian stamps. What happened was they seem to have run out of stamps in 1992, and because there was a big inflation of the postage, so they had to overprint to take a lot of stamps out of storage of previous issues, and overprint them with 20 and a lot of them with 40 lek too. So just an example there. Another used example of the 1918 issue of the 550th anniversary. This here is another anniversary of the first stamp of 2013.
At the bottom of the page, there's an image, I think, of Edith Durham.
Yes, we're going to look at that. I'm going to tell you about that in a moment. Yes, thank you for spotting it.
Yeah.
That was the Kosovan one, actually. This one here is 1,000 lek. Now, that, of course, is very expensive. You know, you've got 5,000 lek notes. And I think at the time when that was issued, I think it was about 350, about 500 lek to the pound. But now, of course, the value's gone down. There was also another stamp with 2,500 lek, actually, at some stage too. Just another example here of a 5 lek here. I think this was another Europa one, the Christopher Columbus, actually, too. They commemorated him. And this was rather a joke stamp, actually, of a clown, too. I rather like that one, too. Now, I just want to end with a plea to the Postage, this is Shqiptari, to issue a stamp with Edith Durham. This one here was published, emitted by Kosovo in 2009. It's one of the early portraits of her. And having spoken to the committee of the Association of Albanian Collectors, I rather interested them in asking them to, because one of the members of their association is also on the postal issuing committee. So when I went to see them in 2019, I spread the idea, and of course her 80th anniversary of death is in 2024. She died in 1944, I think. And so I sent another email to them. I've actually got several other prominent Anglo-Albanians to chip in with a recommendation, and I really hope it will bear fruit. We don't know. During the COVID era, there was rather a dearth of stamps not being issued. And I've just had one of my friends visiting Albania recently, and I've asked them to actually go to the Posta Shqiptare Zuri Philatelic, just off Skanderbeg Square, to see if I can get those issues, because I do pride myself in having almost 80% of all the Albanian stamps, actually. So that's a plea there. I just want to tell you about these stamps here. We call them what we call Cinderella stamps. They were never actually issued, but you will see here that they've got Roosevelt, Gigi Castriotti, and Churchill, and they were issued in 1952. And I think there was some government organization, maybe in Austria, because the stamps are in francs and shillings, which was the Austrian currency, in 1952, to try and oust the communist government, which was only a big hope. But they were never issued at all. Collectors can buy them. But I thought they were rather interesting to end with. But I've got one more stamp I want to end with. And yes, I've got a better issue of the smaller Skanderbo one of 1920, which is quite a true likeness if you just magnify it. And this, of course, has got the post horn here too. Well, look, that's virtually up to date. I expect you've heard enough from me now, and it's been a great pleasure for me to address you on these. I'm afraid some of the presentation is a bit haphazard, but it's a matter of copying. What I normally do, I take my collection of stamps to other philatelic societies in Reading and London, and they can actually see them originally too, which is a little bit more tidier and ask questions. So there we are. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I haven't bored you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Rodney. That was absolutely wonderful. And I feel we all know an awful lot more about stamps in Albania than we did before. I've got one question, because we'll have a short period for questions now.
Yes.
I was making some phone calls today, and I was told that currently there is a stamp fair going on in London. I expect you're aware of this, but could you tell us something about the stamp fair? And
yes, well, twice a year, now we're COVID-free, there is one at the International Centre in Islington, London N9. Actually, it's called Stampex, and it's the post office actually sponsor it. And there's an exhibition of a lot of philatelic specimens, as well as a lot of individual dealers that have their own stalls to sell stamps. And that's where I bought 2 or 3 albums of Albanian stamps as a foundation for my collection. So I think there's one in May actually too, but you'll have to look on the internet, but it's free to go in. And you can buy stamps all over the world. British stamps, of course, the penny black, and also the current post office issues for England. So I hope you would like to visit. I'm certainly going to visit anyway with my Philatelic Society.
Yeah. Very good, thank you. Now I'm sure we have more questions from the floor.
Sorry. Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Are you speaking? Yes.
Yeah, I am.
Who is it from?
Yeah, we're just sorry, just a bit. Well,
It's my friend Naim Hassani.
Yes, Rodney, I'm here.
Oh, hello.
So far, respect. Well, Rodney had a wonderful presentation. I've seen many of his stamp collections. He's my just wonderful friend and a friend of all Albanians and a fantastic lawyer who had many Albanians. And I was fascinated to see the collections which Rodney has, which actually it's so much about Albania, and we Albanians should learn how to have this as well. So well done, Rodney, and thank you. I'm so proud of you. So well done.
Well, I'm seeing you next Thursday, actually, at your new office in the shadow of the Wembley Arena.
Yes, indeed you are. Well, thank you everyone for watching. It's an amazing presentation, a wonderful, wonderful stamps.
Well, thank you very much for your
Thank
congratulations.
you, Rodney. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Yes, very good.
Well, I'm seeing Pat Swar next tomorrow at 6 o'clock when we're having an Albanian lesson by Ida Hazari. I hope she's watching too.
I believe she is in the audience. Yes, I think
Good.
I
I am.
yes,
Oh,
she is.
Birrema.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you. It was very good, wonderful
Good.
presentation. And as I've told you before, and I've talked to Stephen as well, I used to do the same thing when I was young. I mean, younger. So yeah, but
Well,
I gave them away.
Rodney is still young.
Mine. No, I don't have them anymore because a friend of mine, he was obsessed with these postal thing, and I had to give them to him. But yeah, very good collection. Very good.
I'd like to know how many people in the audience are stamp collectors or have stamp collectors. Does anyone like to own up? I do have a few spare stamps if anyone wants stamps, especially the Scandibo ones, which were overprinted with Para and Grosch. I was presented with sheets and sheets of them. So I've got some spares if anyone wants a little specimen to keep.
Well, Tishy might be the person who might well want to respond to that.
Yes.
And she's in the audience, so I hope she's heard that.
Yes, well, those are the Scandibo ones, which is the classic one, which was the first international emission of Albania, of course, in 1914. But I could, if we're having an exhibition of her books, I can bring some of the Scandibo stamps with me, you see, including the volume, which is entirely devoted to Scandibo stamps, for instance, which you can actually buy at the Bibliothek in Sheshi Scandibo Tirana, which I picked up.
Can I say something? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Again.
Well, can I say hello first to Stephen? I'm so happy to see you again.
Very good to see you.
Yes.
And
And
I
you
enjoyed
need
very
to-
much the presentation of Rodney. Wonderful. I have learned that what we have learned in history, it seems to be not always the correct version because of all the, politics interfere. So the Albanian history seems to be always worth to explore from different sources rather than just the local ones. So this was very nice to learn a lot from the stamps, because they seem to be, especially those in the Zog time or Prince Vid time or Skanderbeg and all of that.
Well, I could expand, I could do another talk actually on themes. We could do Albanian castles, Albanian clocks, Roman remains. If you go through the communist issues, they just spelt publicity of these advantages of the country itself. There's 2,000 communist issues too. Because a lot of them are political, but a lot were cultural too. So I've learned a lot actually about Albanian culture.
This was my first time that I managed to join this meeting, because the previous time my internet was broken, so I interrupted. And I feel like I met Steve just yesterday. I feel like no years have passed. I'm sorry, guys. I haven't spoken to Steve for years, and sorry if I'm.
Well, it's very good to see you again, Gianna. And I certainly remember you from the time in the embassy so many years ago.
It was you who hired me first. I'm so grateful.
Right. I do get some things right then. Yes, good.
Yes. And it feels like yesterday, actually. And from that day on, I just fell in love with Britain and British people more and more. And I'm so happy I feel part of this special relationship between the two countries. Although I wish Britain was much more present in the Balkans. It's Britain, it's not some random European country, it's Britain. So I hope they just focus more on the Balkans.
Well, you can see, of course, there's been a lot of issues by our Postage Shqiptari featuring British themes.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
more than others, actually, too. We don't get any from France, Germany, Austria. Britain has featured quite extensively.
Well, Gentiana, you should get the program of the centenary from the embassy. They must be putting out a program at some stage to tell people what is happening and where it's happening.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, that would be very good. And
but
we'll
we don't hear much from them in the media, or the only big event that was that put the embassy in the spotlight again was the showing of the film with James Bond, the recent one. So the ambassador hosted all the people. It was such a special kind of red carpet event. People were dressed up and coming to watch the film, and he was welcoming all of them one by one. So it was so wonderful. In Britain, the embassy was all over, all the media and the ambassador greeting everyone, and it was organized so well. So, it should be more. It should be more like that, because it's Britain.
Well, I think you'll find there's quite a lot of that going on during the course of this calendar year.
Excellent. I will try to join as much as possible.
Yes. Maybe you could help us create events as well, Gentiana. We would.
Oh, of course, I would be happy to, and I'll try to think of ideas.
Well, very good to see you anyway. I'm very glad you made it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, any more questions from?
So we do have a raised hand from Emily, Stephen. So Emily, please do go ahead with your question.
Hi, I think Gazim had his hand up before me. Do you still want to ask your question, Gazim?
No, go ahead, ladies first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was really, really interesting. I do like stamps. My dad gave me his stamp collection, and I used to be a postman, so I used to get some lots of freebies from the post office, etc. A long time ago in the UK. And I have a few Albanian stamps. It was nice to see some of the ones that I used to send my postcards from when I went to Albania in the post-communist period. I'm really interested to know, you talked about all the way up to sort of the association with China, and then you talked about from 91, but how was the postal service or the stamps that were issued in the sort of 78 to 91 period, in the sort of isolation period? How did the post office change? Was it more focused on propaganda, or I didn't see any stamps from that period, so I just wondered.
I think there was very, very few propaganda ones. They mainly issued stamps. There was one, for instance, for Graf Zeppelin that did the airships, for instance. You see, they did quite a few of musicians, screamatari, that is authors, more cultural than anything else. But I think very little political, because Enver Hoxha died in 1985. The only issue afterwards, as I said, was I think his 80th anniversary post-death of his portrait in 1986 or 1987, something like that. But very few, really, mainly cultural. And of course, I think the communist regime was flattening out in a little bit more socialistic themes. And yes, I said it was more cultural. I do have several of those stamps, but again, they flooded the embassies with those stamps purely to spread the culture and the prestige and memory of the communist regime. But it was fading then, of course.
Mm. Yeah, no, I just wondered if there was if they had to if they ended up to save money in that period, reused earlier stamps, like you say, with the overstamping or anything, or not?
No, I don't think there was. No, there wasn't any. No, I don't think there was actually. No, they were all right, I think.
There's a second element to a question. As I'm an archaeologist and I'm interested in archives.
Yes.
Have you been? Is there a Postal Service of Albania archive in itself, or are there people who work for the Postal Service who have a catalogue of all these stamps, or is it just they were?
Well, I've got several catalogues. One was made by the president of the Albanian Collectors Philatelic Association, and another one, much more famous, of course, is Stanley Gibbons, which is the UK company, which piloted philately since about 1856, and their catalogues are very, very detailed, showing a picture of the stamp, the printer, the author, and then the value you can actually buy from Stanley Gibbons. Okay. So you can actually get a catalogue if you go into the Grand Office WC2, or you can buy it online from Stanley Gibbons. I think the current catalogue I've got at the moment goes up to 2018, and it costs about £39, and it's really good value.
Okay, thank you very much. Cheers.
Right, any more questions?
Just another question, rather a thought. Rodney, thank you very much indeed. It was very enlightening, especially for someone like me who knows nothing about stamps. I was intrigued by some of the words used in the early stamps. For instance, vetvaria. I've never come across that word for self-determination, independence, which in Albanian, if you translate it literally, means committing suicide. that was quite something. If I read you correctly, the first stamps in Albania appeared in the book by John Phipps in 1878. Did I get that correct?
Yes, I've actually got the volume by John Phipps, actually. Yes, he did an awful lot of research. I don't know how many years it took, but it goes to, as I said, the quantity of each stamp that was issued and how many were bought, for instance, you see, right up to the nearest 5. It's right. Tremendously detailed.
So these stamps, there are stamps there which, you know, the Ottoman Empire with an Albanian theme, or it has nothing to do about Albania?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the point.
In this volume by John Phipps,
yes,
is there any stamp as early as 1878 with an Albanian theme? Apparently they were produced by the Ottoman Empire.
No, I think the first post office, Ottoman opened a post office in Albania, or its territories as it was then known, was about 1876, and they used the old Ottoman stamps, which of course are very rare and quite expensive, but I really couldn't afford them at the moment. Right. However, I've got the Ottoman stamps, as I said, from about 1896, which were rather rough and ready with the Sultan's signature, rather like a ball of wool, as I described it.
Well, I mean, you really must have quite a lot of patience to collect these things. And on a final point, I wonder if your interest in stamps goes beyond Albanian stamps. I mean, are you interested in the stamps of the region, the Balkans, or?
I collect the United Kingdom. Yes, I've got every United Kingdom stamp since 1840, actually. In fact, I've got one from posted to my grandfather, actually, who was manager of the Bank of Scotland about 1845, which a penny black on too. So I've actually traced where he used to live, and I've got a oil portrait of him too. So I've done a bit of my own family tree with some pointers are my own personal stamps.
Make sure you have them insured. You never know.
Oh
You
no,
get
I've got
rich one day.
well insured. That you are, as long as you stick them in an album tidily, you are insured. If you have the stamps loose, you're not insured.
By the way, thanks a lot. It was very, very entertaining and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, the other point is, of course, I've done a catalogue also of all the different spellings of Albania too, like Shqiponese, Shqiptaria, with using the Y and the I and so on and so on. I thought there was the Congress of Monastir in 1908, which standardized it, but nobody seems to have taken any notice of it. Can anyone throw any light on the ancient, the rather spellings? Because January apparently was Cal Noir. I looked it up in my dictionary.
Yeah, Cal Noor. Yeah.
Well, I agree.
Yes.
You think about the spelling of the word for Albania is very interesting. And can anybody tell us more about Shqipnia and where did that come from and when did it stop being current?
I really don't know at all. There were different spellings right during the I think during the communist period too. You know, but anyway, it's been standard now to Postage Shqiptari. Shqipëria, Shqipëria is the standard international universal postal union's description of Albanian stamps. And of course, UK, England is the only country got the privilege of not having the name on at all. You simply have to have the Queen's head or the sovereign's head. We are the exception because we were the first country to issue official stamps.
Yes, that's a good point. Well, thank you very much, Rodney. It's been an excellent evening, and I think we are very thankful to you, and a lot of people have learned a lot. I mean, certainly for me, it's been a real revelation. And of course, I'm very interested in things Albanian, but I've never really had an insight into Albanian stamps, so I'm extremely grateful.
We do have one more question from Mr. Hackmans. He's got his raised hand.
Rodney, that was very good.
Thank you.
Rodney, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I have a few Albanian stamps, and I sort of collect them over the years, and sort of have a small collection. Just one question: during the Ottoman time, I do know that different administrators of cities weren't allowed to correspond with each other because the Ottomans were very paranoid about any autonomy or grab for independence by the Albanians. So if they wanted to correspond with each other, it had to be written back to the port in Constantinople, and then that information was relayed back to Albania to whichever other administration that the other Albanian was trying to talk to. Within Albania itself during the Ottoman times, were Albanians sending letters to each other?
I really don't know. All I pointed out was that the infrastructure hardly existed. There were no railways until 1947. The roads were really non-existent until possibly Prince Weed's time. I remember I read a history of the 6 Months Kingdom, and he was able to travel in a motor car from Durrës to Tirana to give a speech. And he must have got there somehow.
His kingdom never went any further east than trying to think of the name of the village, but it's only about 4 miles from Durrës. Yeah, but there was obviously still correspondence going back to the port.
Yeah, there were post offices, you see, inland. But
I'm just wondering if the Albanians themselves actually were allowed to send letters to each other.
I think they were, if they could afford it. I have got in FIPS a list of the postal rates. I haven't really studied them at all, but I should think if you could only send a letter, I feel fairly literate, I would have thought.
Yeah, there would have been that much. There wasn't.
You had started to receive a letter too. But I think
the
stamps came into their own, you see, through commercialism increasing, trading with Europe, And tourism, I suppose, must have contributed a little bit about, but post must have been extremely slow. And I don't know about the reliability of it, because I think if you read Edward Lear and his descriptions of his traveling, it was hazardous to say the least.
Yeah. Actually, I think your point about the illiteracy rate pretty much answered the question.
Yes.
Yeah, because I do know that in the north there was only something like at the time of the formation of the Albanian language, there was only something like 4 people that could actually read and write.
The church, of course, and the ministers, of course, and those who'd probably, I don't know whether they spoke English or what language they spoke. I suppose they must have spoken, I think most of them at the beginning of the year 2000, spoke Italian. And now, of course, English is more or less the dominant second language.
Yeah. I think that answers it pretty much there.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Everyone, I think you've got to give time to people to think, really.
Right. Maybe we better draw a line there unless someone's burning to ask another question. But I do hope we'll see you at our future events. The next event, as I already said, is the author Kapka Kazabova talking about her autobiographical work, which is about Lake Ohrid and Prespa Lakes. And that'll take place on the 30th of March. So I hope we'll all on that day.
Thank you.
And once again, many, many thanks to Rodney. And I think we should applaud him in this way.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great honor to address you anyway. If you want a thematic, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodney.
Yes, good night, everyone. Thank you very much for your introduction,
Thank you,
Stephen.
Rodney. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Everybody.